So, tonight, our esteemed guest is David Dastmalchian. You may know him from many projects, but we're here to kind of tickle the horror side of things, as we always do. And his latest project is Count Crowley, the reluctant, emphasis on reluctant, Midnight Monster Hunter. Uh, and so, we're just going to ask some questions. He's generously given us some time tonight to talk about some stuff. And, well, David, if you want to introduce yourself. You know yourself better than anybody else.
Thank you for having me on the show. This is, I guess, our modern day equivalent of the way we could do horror hosting. Who would have thought that horror hosts would be doing Skype viewings and watching movies on streaming networks? It's wacky, but here we are. It's great to be here. I love horror films. I love just the entire genre of horror. And yes, I'm very excited. I have a new comic book coming from Dark Horse in October the 23rd. In fact, just a little over a week before the most sacred day of the year. And it's a story about a woman who doesn't want to be a horror host, but gets that job because her alcoholism is so out of hand, her brother can't employ her anywhere else. And when she becomes a horror host, she actually becomes quite popular. And it turns out there's a secret job that comes with this hosting position. The man that she's replaced, who's gone missing, was actually one of the world's last appointed monster hunters. And so I am very excited for everyone to get their hands on that. And hopefully to talk about some good horror movies with you guys this evening.
Absolutely. Big horror chops. You've been doing this for a while, and all the stuff that you've really been in off stage and on screen has been creepy. It's been dark, even when it's skewed sci-fi and superhero era stuff. You've always been that in the dark, shadowy kind of character. So, can you tell us why you love horror so much? What is the appeal there, and why are you such a big
I've
guy
al-
about it?
yeah. I love all the mise-en-scene and the magic behind making a great horror film. Everything from the Argento stuff straight back to like the early silent film stuff. Look at Phantom of the Opera, and you look at the sets, and you look at it's probably that theatrical person in me that always loved the theater. But there's something about the costumes, the makeup, obviously the excitement, the sense of dread, and the adrenaline rush that you get when a film really, gets inside your head and takes you on a wild ride. And obviously, as we know, there are so many amazing subgenres of horror. So what I was first introduced to, though, was the classic world of horror cinema, the Universal stuff, the Hammer stuff, all the great William Castle and B and even Z bad movies, the Ed Wood stuff. My local horror host was the great Crematia Mortem
Nice.
on Channel 41 when I was a kid. She hosted the Friday Nightmare, and I would sneak downstairs and I would watch her in secret because it was against the
Of
rules at my
course,
house.
the best
And
TVs.
the best. But I love that world, and I believe the world is actually populated by good and bad monsters. And I think monster movies can be wonderful when they're focused on both kinds of monsters. And in certain films, you get them battling one another. So yeah,
I mean, I love Guillermo del Toro because that's all it is. Is the monsters are the people, and the monsters in the movie are actually the good things.
it's
It's it's,
very
it's a good
often truly the
reflection.
case. Yeah.
So tonight, you've picked. We let you curate these movies, and you've picked Magic and Dead Ringers. So what are your thoughts on these two movies, and what made you pick them together in a double feature?
Interesting. Off the hip, I had been meaning and wanting to watch Magic for a while because that movie really messed me up as a kid. We had a neighbor growing up who had a poster from the film on his wall, and it was something about that ventriloquist mask's eyes, ventriloquist dummy's eyes, and
Ooh.
that was the old poster. It was just his eyes and the tip of his smile. So as a kid, that was all it took was that no the knowledge that a doll, that an inanimate object could have so much power over somebody, whether or not that person had psychological issues, psychiatric issues, is all, I didn't think about any of that as a kid. It was just like this horrifying you know, murder movie about a doll and a guy under its control. And then with Dead Ringers, it's like I'm trying to write this comic book right now that really, what I don't want, as much as I love and have been collecting horror comics and just traditional classic straight A, B to C, you know, horror stories, I want this comic to look and feel and move like a great horror comic, but at the same time, I want there to be a lot of exploration of darker and deeper issues, which, you know, include so many different things, from body politics to body horror to actual politics to the way news and media influence our society to addiction to depression. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I feel like Cronenberg is just such a master of taking really big ideas and really big difficult questions and filtering them into his films. And so basically, knowing that I was going to get to curate with you guys, I chose selfishly two things that I've been wanting to catch up on for quite a while.
Those are two very, very off-the-shelf picks. I don't think people are walking around thinking about those movies, and that's what we want to do, is bring some obscure stuff back to the forefront, because that's where innovation happens, is in the weird stuff. That little pile of dirt in your closet that grows into a monster. So,
yes.
And if people follow you on Twitter, they're going to see that there's a lot of back and love between you and Sven Gulli. And you've appeared on 2 episodes of that long-running Saturday Night Horror, which is celebrating 50 years on air. What do you think the appeal of these late-night creature feature, double feature shows are? And like revivals, like we've got The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob is back in the forefront on Shudder. What's the appeal of that kind of show in that format?
First of all, I love that Joe Bob is back, and I love Shudder. So shout out to Shudder. Tag Shudder on this. I'm so grateful to have Shudder. My wife gave me my account as a gift, knowing me very well. And the catalog there is so good. And their originals are so great. My buddy Josh Mallerman and my friend John Skip both wrote pieces for the new Creep Show, and I love it. I think it's so awesome. What was I going to say? The appeal. Well, Sven Gulli, he's a god of horror host. I mean, he's a legend. He's a wonderful guy. Rich, who is Sven Gulli, is just a wonderful guy, and we share a love of classic movies and comic books and a lot of great things. But you know, I think that the appeal of someone like Rich, someone like Crematia, someone like Elvira, Joe Bob, there's all different types of horror hosts. Remember, there are those that take it and have taken it very seriously and approach it like they're really out. There's the great ones with the sense of humor, the classics like Zacherle, etc. Vampira, who was truly the first horror host of all, and didn't ever get the respect during her lifetime that she deserved for what she did. I think that people love to be scared. They love a good classic film, but there is something really warm and inviting and wonderful about feeling like you're entering the dungeon, you're entering this space with this person, and they're going to take you on this 2-hour tour of a movie. And some of those movies are really scary. Some might be schlockily hilarious. But it also makes you feel like you're sitting in the living room with somebody who's watching it with you. And I think that's always been a great sense of appeal to the great horror
It
hosts.
almost reminds me of, and I mean, this is past all of our times, but like it's almost like the radio show that you all tuned in and listened to, but it was like the TV equivalent of that. And it always had that appeal of everybody gathers around for, you know, this once a week event, and it was cool. Stuff you didn't get to see during regular time. So, do you have any Halloween traditions? It is a very sacred holiday. You know, Sam Hain is All Hallows Eve.
Very sacred.
No. What do you do?
We watch a ton of movies. I mean, I watch horror movies. I watch 3 or 4 movies a week, probably, and usually 1 or 2 of those is a horror film. So we do double down because my wife isn't a huge horror film fanatic, and so it's fun during the holidays because I can really twist her arm into watching some stuff with me. We just watched Midsummer the other night. I got her to watch that. That was You know what? I'm gonna watch that by myself. I didn't know if there was anything in that she couldn't
it's
handle.
much longer.
So
It's
I'll
I mean
do
it's
that
pretty
alone.
disturbing all the way through. So it does add even more to the disturbingness. So maybe not. It is great.
It's so good. He's such a great director. But a tradition, we decorate the house. We go crazy with the decorations. I've got an entire attic storage space, and I'd say 90% of that is Halloween decor. We throw quite a big Halloween party, although I won't be able to do it this year because I'm traveling for work. I like to go to haunted houses. If I'm visiting different cities, I like to visit the haunted houses. That are being put on at that, in that particular region, because I grew up in Kansas City where haunted houses were big. The Edge of Hell, Nightmares, those were all really incredible experiences. And then I personally have been collecting horror vinyl, the Sounds of Halloween records since I was a kid, and I now have a pretty extensive collection. And what we've done is we've taken the vinyl out of the sleeves, and my wife is so cool. She framed all of the vinyl,
Yeah.
I mean, all of the sleeves, so that they line one of the walls in our house, but then the actual records are in their own kind of accordion record holder, and they're labeled, because I'm a little meticulous about how I like them labeled, and who published it and what's on it. And then every night we get by the record player and we put on a record or two and listen to
Very
Halloween
cool.
records.
That's awesome.
It's awesome.
Jealous. So, how did the leap from acting to writing a comic come? Where did that come from?
I've been writing my whole life, journaling. I worked in the theater and I wrote some plays that were produced in the Fringe, or smaller pieces, and then short films. I started making short films with my really close friend Colin Shifley around 2008. And it was always horror. We love horror, and we did a lot of horror short films together. We didn't make them public. We didn't do much with them other than we just loved making them. And the more we made them, the more fun we were having, making these films. And I personally, in my life, have struggled and battled with addiction. And I had written a drama script about addiction. And when the time came that I felt like I really needed to make that movie, Colin was the right person to direct it. And so I wrote that film. We made it for pennies, and it ended up doing quite well, and that helped us greenlight our next film, which was called All Creatures Here Below, which is another drama that just came out in May, and that was a really incredible experience. And that opened the door for me, I think, in my imagination, to think about the possibilities of what else I could do with my writing. Now, going back, I've been collecting comics for about 30 years now, and I've been a fan of, ever since Cremation Mortem and the creature feature, the genre, for about 30 years. So initially I was thinking that this idea of a horror host who has to pick up the mantle of an appointed monster hunter was going to make a really neat idea for a television series. I wanted to think about, how would you write a horror series? Like, I used to love Kolchak the Night Stalker. I loved Friday the 13th, the series. I love all the greats. There's so much cool stuff now, Stranger Things and American Horror Story, and there's a long list of horror in television. But this I thought it made sense because it was the plot and the way that the world was created. I have dozens and dozens of things that I need to make, that I want to make happen with the heroes, and then also the good and the bad monsters in this world of Count Crowley. So I asked my friend and boss, Peter Lankov, I said, Peter, by the way, is a really successful television producer, creator. He wrote R.I.P.D.,
Yeah.
which is a great, horror thing. And I said, Peter, I got this idea. I don't know how to pitch it, though. Can you give me some advice? So he said, tell me what's your idea, and I can help you figure out how you could take it, and I'll introduce you to people. So I told him the idea, and he goes, I love that idea. He goes, that reminds me of the stuff that I love. It's got a bit of Kolchak, and it's got this, and it's got that, and it's got the classic horror, and it's got really intense, themes that are relevant. And he was like, I would like to develop this with you. And then he is friends with Mike Richardson at Dark Horse Comics, and they came to me, actually, Peter, and said, we think you should meet with Dark Horse. I think that this would make an incredible comic book series. And then you can really build this world and tell the story you want to tell, and then hopefully we can take it to some other media in the future. And I'm like, they didn't realize, I don't think, like how intense I was going to react to that suggestion. It was like, it was really kind of mind-boggling. And so pretty immediately I turned around. Next thing I knew, an editor was paired with me, the great Megan Walker at Dark Horse. And then the next thing you know, Megan and I were talking to, looking at artists' work, and we so miraculously got Lucas Kettner, who came on board to draw the piece, and the rest of the team filled out, and I can't believe we're just like a few weeks away. Before our call tonight, I was looking at because there's a lot of digital assets are passed back and forth as we're finalizing looks for different comics, and we're up to issue 4 now. Even though issue 1 hasn't been released, we're a few steps ahead in the production phase, and just seeing Lucas's covers and his inks and his pencils, and then Lauren gets her colors in the mix. It's really a great experience. I can't wait for people to read this. In just the first 4-issue arc, I get werewolf, which is one of my favorite monsters. I get a really great zombie. In my world, we're called Billy's Bilitomias, or it's a kind of psychic slave. And there's even the hand of something is introduced. You don't really know what it is, but it's pale, it has long fingers, and it seems pretty much like one of the living dead.
Interesting. So that's a good segue, because we were going to ask you, Jerry's design. Have you always had Jerry in the back of your head, that character? And, how much did Lucas contribute to that vision once he had the artist attached?
He's amazing, man. For many years, I thought Jerry was a man, Jerry. I thought Jerry was going to be a man, and just kind of a schlumpy guy that like really had a bad attitude and really gave up on himself, and then he was going to be confronted with this predicament, this idea that like, oh my God, now I'm expected to have to fight and learn how to fight monsters. And for him, really, when I was thinking about it in the terms like that, he and his self-destructive tendencies, the only person he had left is his brother Ben, who runs this TV station. And when you find out that Ben is actually being targeted by this certain sect of monsters who want to really infiltrate American news and media because they're trying to spin false information into our society, that's when he decided to get involved. And then I got to know a number of really kick-ass women over the last 5-10 years, and there was a lot of similarities between these women's stories about some of the real-life monsters that they'd come in contact with, and this idea of trying to tell people about some horrifying person or some horrific thing that this person's doing, and just having people kind of like look at you like you're crazy, or like, oh, you must have a secret agenda. And I thought, holy crap, how intense would it be if Jerry is Jeri, and it's short for like maybe Geraldine, or I don't know. And what if she is a woman? And what if, she really wants to be a serious news anchor? She wants to be taken seriously. She goes to report the news, and a horrible thing does happen to her in the comic in the past by like a star news reporter basically assaults her. And when she goes to tell people, no one will believe her because they think she's just ambitious, she's an alcoholic, she's got mental problems. So now she has to figure out not only how to deal with all these internal demons, but then she has to figure out how to fight monsters. And an element I love about this, and hopefully you guys will really get how much fun this has been, is that the only resource that Jerry will have right now is the guy who was the mentor to the now missing Count Crowley. So the guy who mentored Count Crowley is a guy named Vincent Freitz. And Vincent Freitz is now a senile old man in a nursing home. And if there's one thing that Vincent disdains more than monsters, it's women who don't know their place. And he is basically like, girl, go find a man to keep you safe. There's no way that you're the appointed one. This is some kind of mistake. And you're basically going to probably die soon anyway. Because once normal people are exposed to the truth, they tend to be by the monsters. So Jerry realizes her brother's a target of the monsters' agenda, and she ends up saying, "Screw you, Vincent! I'm going to figure out how to stop this thing that's trying to, turn my brother into a psychic slave." And she ends up really getting kind of caught up in her own
Very
fate.
nice. So, another question about the comic, and we're getting close to the end here. And you've given us a lot of great stuff. We don't want to keep you forever. Why did you have this comic set in 1983 as opposed to present day? Because there's a lot of present day themes in this. I mean, these politics and
Sure.
these issues with women and being assaulted and positions by people in power and not being taken seriously. It's very pertinent.
I said it in 1983 for two reasons. One, 1983, the mid 80s was really when I came of age and started watching horror films. If I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, it was in those years that I started to really discover my love of monster movies and also comic books like Tomb of Dracula, Werewolf by Night, and all those things that I loved. And then plot wise, it was really important for me. I didn't want to write around. It's tricky for me to imagine being able to capture footage of, or not being able, I should say, to capture something convincing in 2019 because of cell phones, because of the internet, because our access to people is much more available right now. So I just was thinking about plot wise, I was like, ooh, that's going to be very tricky because she's such a smart person, Jerry, and she would find some way. Um, Now, the biggest thing though for me was, as I was doing my research, 1983 was really the beginning of cable television. And so in the world of Count Crowley, monsters they were nearly beat into extinction several thousand years ago. That's why they
Monsters,
became to us
boogeymen.
what we
Yeah.
think of as like mythology. Yeah, they were just like, that was a story. But way back when, people knew that was actually quite real, and the appointed ones were needed. There was many more, and they fought them into the caves. So there's only a few demon head basically generals left, and they retreated. They recapitulated a much better plan and strategy, which was creating different kinds of monsters that then slowly could begin to infiltrate society, live in plain sight. And they knew and understood that mankind was so greatly and easily swayed by fear and information. And so they started figuring out ways to supplant the information and news that were given through both the media and literature, et cetera. So like you and I think if someone said, how are we going to stop a werewolf that's trying to break in the house? We try and melt silver, get a silver bullet and shoot it. It's a total lie. They propagated that myth. A wooden stake wouldn't stop a vampire. All it would do is make him laugh. I mean, it's so much harder to kill monsters in this
I knew we
real
were lied
world
to.
of Count
I
Crowley
knew it.
than
It makes too much
I
sense.
think. So we've been lied to. So cable news, the monsters see the potential of cable and how much access they're going to have to people, around the world. And so that is why I thought 1983 would be such a great time to set
Very
the
nice.
show.
I like that. You gotta have that plausible deniability technologically there.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on this earlier when you were talking about the comic and the run, and you already worked on the fourth issue. Your plans for the future for Count Crowley. You obviously want to take this way farther. You envisioned it as a television series. Uh,
All the way, man. If this is what I get, if this is it, I get 4 issues
that's
published by
more than most
Dark Horse
people.
Comics, one of the leaders in comic books. It's a huge achievement. I'm very, very proud of what we've done. But I mean, the end of issue 4, we have just literally taken the wolf's nail and just barely scratched the surface of the
I like
coffin's
that.
lid. Like there is so much that I want to show readers to with this comic book. So what I'm hoping happens is that everybody out there goes and buys it at their comic shop, and then Dark Horse turns around to me and they go, you know what, people really bought that comic, so let's do some more. I get to come because I do have right now like 3 years of scripts ready to
Nice.
go. And then if it's streaming, if it's a television series, that could come out in chapters, I just think it would be so cool to get to be on a set and start to film the world of Count Crowley. And where else it goes from there, I think like Video games would be really neat and fun. I think VR experience could be incredible. Radio plays. There's so much I would love to do with this story. And I want to keep investigating my favorite kinds of monsters. I love this. I found this that I have a copy of back at home, but I found a better copy. It's from Famous Monsters of Filmland, which is an incredible magazine. I'm sure a lot of your viewers collected Famous Monsters, and they're back now. But Curse of the Werewolf was a film that I saw on Crematia's show, and I want to keep creating monsters like that really scare the crap out of us, but then in the same token, you can end up feeling like incredibly empathetic towards and feel like a sense of connection with as an audience. I want to do that for the rest of my life.
All right, so I mean that'd be the last question is: do you think if this takes off, would you rather be instead of on the screen? Would you rather just be the guy behind the scenes running the whole show, or what do you want to do?
I would love if I was to be so lucky as to have this become a really a produced show. I would love to be behind the scenes helping to shape and produce the world of the show and making sure that we got all the detail right and all the attention to things right, and finding creative people who are really passionate about the material and encouraging and providing them with the tools they'd need to do their work. I would love to see practical makeup effects artists get involved with the show like this. I would love to see somebody build a real werewolf transition that doesn't rely entirely on CG. But I've written some characters who maybe you won't see in the first couple issues of the comic book, but there's some characters that are in the works, that are coming, that I may or may not be dreamcasting myself as already.
I'll have to keep a lookout for him. So I'd like to thank you, David, for your time tonight. These have been some fantastic talking points. We're really excited to show your movies, and we definitely, because this is going to be, the comic's going to be out, we want you all to come pick these comics up. Your local comic store, it's always good to support them. Definitely support new authors and up-and-coming IPs, because this is going to be big. I think this is the next Creep Show. Honestly, I love it.
Thank you so much.
That's just my opinion, but I'm not wrong often, David. You don't know this about me, but very, very few times am I wrong. My girlfriend is the only one that knows when I'm wrong, so it goes without saying. But we appreciate coming on the call tonight and talking to us about the Count and where he's going and where he's hopefully going to end up.
Much. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone enjoys Magic, starring the great Anthony Hopkins, Burgess Meredith, and Anne Margaret, and a creepy-looking doll, and the incredible David Cronenberg body horror classic, Dead Ringers, starring Jeremy Irons, and starring Jeremy Irons, inspired by a true story. You don't believe me? Go look it up.